Today we are going to go over Chapter 8, Section 4. We're skipping over a little bit and we'll jump back and forth a little, but we're going to start this chapter with Section 4. So the objective today, students will be able to simplify rational expressions and multiply and divide rational expressions. So those are the big things that we're looking at today. So this is going to be a review of dividing functions. Don't forget your excluded values. So we already did this before. So really, if you can do this, that's most of what we're going to be working on today. So we have x squared plus x minus 6 is f of x. Then we have g of x is 2x squared plus x minus 15. And we are going to divide them. So the first thing you need to do is we need to factor both of those. So I'm going to set this up, x squared plus x minus 6 divided by 2x squared plus x minus 15. Then factor both of them. So the top part, we have numbers that multiply to be -6 that add up to be 1. So that's going to be 2 and 3, and the 2 is going to be negative. Since there's no number in front, we can take the shortcut. So we have x minus 2 times x plus 3. That's what the numerator is. Then the denominator is the same type of thing. The only difference is when we factor that one, we've got this number in front. So I need to take 2 times -15 is -30. Factors of -30 to add up to be 1. That is going to be 6 and 5. But the 5 then is going to be negative. Again, double check this. 6 times -5 is -30. 6 plus -5 is +1. Check your positives and negatives with that. But we can't take the shortcut like we did the last time because we have this number in front. So we have to do it the long way. 2x squared plus 6x minus 5x minus 15. Remember, the first number and the last number both stay the same. They're here. And then instead of this x, we replace that with 6x and a -5x. That's what goes right here. So make sure you don't forget how to set that up. Then we have to do that factor by grouping step. So put these together. Make sure you remember that this minus sign stays with that 5. So make sure you keep that there and add your own plus sign. That's what I always do. So the first one we can factor out at 2x. That leaves x plus 3. And the last one we can factor out a -5. Remember, if that first sign is negative in that second group, you want to factor out a negative number. So I factor out a -5. That leaves you with x plus 3. So those two go together, x plus 3 and 2x minus 5. So we have x plus 3 times 2x minus 5. So now that we have those and those are both factored, if you have the same thing on the top and the bottom, you can cancel those. So x plus 3 and x plus 3 cancel. All we have left is x minus 2 times 2x minus 5. But remember, we need our excluded values. Remember, your excluded values are what can x not be equal to, because it would make the denominator 0. We can never have a 0 denominator, so we got our answer over here. But when you find what you can't, or when you find your excluded values, don't look at your answer, look over here before you canceled stuff. So what would make this part 0? Well, -3. And let's see, 2x minus 5. What would make that 0? If you can't figure it out, make sure you solve it. 2x is equal to 5. Divide by 2. We get x is equal to 5 over 2. So not only do you want that as your answer, but we also have to say x cannot be equal to -3 and 5 over 2. Now remember, this a lot of people get confused because it says x is equal to -3, but over here I say x is not equal to. It's because that's what makes this 0. -3 would make this part 0, so that's why x cannot be equal to that. 5 over 2 would make this part 0. That's why x cannot be equal to that. So make sure you list your excluded values, the things that x cannot be equal to. We'll be doing that kind of a lot today. Now the other thing I didn't mention yet, since I jumped right into this, but the good thing about doing these lessons as a video is because if I went too fast, you can pause it and you can go back and watch that over again. When you're doing these on your own, you can go back and do it step by step. Watch the first step. Look at this factoring over here. Once you have that factoring done, pause it. Then you do factoring. Then you can start and you can do it that way. But make sure you use this to your advantage. Rewind a lot. pause things a lot, whatever you need to do. Rewatch things over and over. That's a huge benefit to these video lessons. So let's do the same thing then with number 2. Make sure we remember our excluded values. That's what I always forget with these. So we're doing division again. And even though the last one is written is set up with this division, I always like to set up with that fraction. But we've done that before. So this ends up being 4x squared minus 27x minus 7 over x squared minus 2x minus 35. And we need to factor some of that stuff. So the first one's got a leading coefficient, so you can't do the shortcut. So I have 4 times negative 7 goes on top. My first number times my last number, that's negative 28. What numbers multiply to be negative 28 that add up to be negative 27? That's going to be 1 and 28. So again, 2 numbers, they both multiply to be negative 28. Both add up to be negative 27. But remember, one of them has to be negative. Again, check your signs, double check. 1 times negative 28 is negative 28. 1 plus negative 28 is negative 27. So my first number stays the same. Then I have my plus 1x, plus 1x, and minus 28x. Then my last number stays the same. And then we do our factor by grouping. You have to do it this way when you've got a number there in front. So that minus, remember, stays with my 28. Don't forget that. Add your own plus sign. So I factor out an x. That leaves 4x plus 1. Then if we have a negative right there, we have to factor a negative out. So I'm going to factor out a negative 7, which means negative 28 divided by negative 7, is positive 4. Negative 7 divided by negative 7 is positive 1. So we get 4x plus 1 times x minus 7. So that's what we get for that numerator. 4x plus 1 times x minus 7. Now we have to factor the denominator. The good news is it's got a leading coefficient of 1, so it should be a little bit easier. Negative 35 on top, negative 2 on bottom. And then 5 and 7, they both multiply to be negative 35. One of them has to be negative, though, so negative 7. That way they both multiply to be negative 35, and they add up to be negative 2. Check your work. Make sure you do that right. And then again, we can do the shortcut. That's x plus 5 times x minus 7. Now again, this is where, if you're finding your excluded values, this is where I would do it. I would stop here before you cancel anything. This is what you have to look at to see what gets you 0. So what would make your denominator 0? Well, negative 5 would make it 0, and positive 7. That would make both of those 0. But again, if that's 0, that means x cannot equal those. That would make it 0 in the denominator if x were to equal those. So x cannot equal negative 5 and positive 7. Those are the excluded values. They also say that's the restrictions on the variables. So from here, x minus 7's cancel, and we have 4x plus 1 on top and x plus 5 on bottom. You need all that. Your excluded values or your restrictions and that fraction. So now we're going to jump into, that was a review from what we've done before, but now we're going to get into simplifying rational expressions. But really, you'll see these rational expressions are really the exact same way we've set it up when we do division. So really, this first part with division is just a review from what we've done before. So, first step, need a factor, just like before. Now the good news is this x plus 4 squared is just x plus 4 times x plus 4. I like to write that out. Then this one has a leading coefficient, so it's going to take a little while. 2 times 12 is 24. 2 numbers that multiply to be 24 that add up to be 11. 3 and 8, they're both positive. Now you can't just go ahead and put 3 and 8 here. That's wrong. That's taking the shortcut. You can't take the shortcut because we have that leading coefficient. So don't forget that. This chapter, you're going to get a lot of practice factoring. So make sure you're getting good at factoring. So the first number stays the same. The last number stays the same. Then we change, we have 3x and 8x. So now we do our factor by grouping. Put those together, add your own plus sign there. So the first one, we can only take out an x. We can't take anything else out. So that leaves 2x plus 3. This had 2 x's, we took 1 out. This had 1 x, we took it out, so we don't have any x's in there. Then the next one, I'm going to be able to factor out, it looks like a 4. So factor out a positive 4. 8 divided by 4 is 2. We didn't do anything with that x. 12 divided by 4 is 3. So that ends up being 2x plus 3 times x plus 4. 2x plus 3 times x plus 4. And again, this is where we still need to look at the restrictions on the variables. We still need to look at excluded values. So what makes this denominator 0? This is a good time to do it. You want to do it before you cancel things. So let's see, we have 2x plus 3. If you don't know what makes this equal to 0, put it equal to 0 and solve. 2x is equal to negative 3. Divide by 2, x is equal to negative 3 over 2. And then what makes this second part 0? Well, that should be easy. If you need to set it up this way, you can. X plus 4 is equal to 0. But hopefully you realize that's just going to be negative 4. So that's the other one. So whatever our answer ends up being, x cannot be equal to negative 4 and negative 3 over 2. And again, the reason for that is because if it was equal to that, it would make the bottom 0. That's the whole point of doing this over here. So now, if you have the same thing on top and the same thing on bottom, you can cancel. So I have an x plus 4 on top, an x plus 4 on bottom, you can cancel. Make sure you don't cancel both of them. If there was 2 of them in the bottom, then yes, you could cancel both of them. But since there's only 1, you can only take 1 out on top. If you took this one out instead and left this one and didn't cross this one out, that's fine. It doesn't matter which one of those, as long as you take one of them and leave the other. So we end up with x plus 4, I guess I don't need parentheses, x plus 4 on top, and in bottom we have 2x plus 3. And we have those excluded values on there. Number 4, same thing. We have this fraction. First thing you're going to do is you're going to want to factor everything you can. So the numerator, again, we have a leading coefficient, so it makes it a little harder, but hopefully at this point you guys are getting pretty good at this. 2 numbers that multiply to be negative 30 that add up to be negative 13. A lot of people try 3 and 10, but it doesn't work. 3 times 10 is positive 30. Well, if you make one of them negative, now they don't add up to be negative 13, they add up to be negative 7. So it's not 3 and 10, it's actually 2 and 15. So be careful with that. That's why you always want to check your work. Sorry. 2 and negative 15. Make sure 2 times negative 15 is negative 30. 2 plus negative 15 is negative 13. So our first number stays the same. Our middle 2 numbers, our x numbers, come from our x factoring. And our last number stays the same. And now is when we do the factor by grouping. Make sure that minus stays with this 15. The first group, I can't take anything out, so I just take out an x. That leaves 5x plus 2. The second group, I can factor out a negative. You have to factor out a negative something. I'm going to factor out a negative 3. That's the biggest thing you can take out. That's positive 5x plus 2. So those go together, 5x plus 2 times x minus 3. I'm hoping that you guys get to a problem like this and you don't like it because it takes some time, a little extra time, but I'm hoping you guys know how to do it. It's pretty easy, it just takes a while. So our numerator is 5x plus 2 times x minus 3. Then our denominator, we have to factor out this part. So we have x squared minus 9. Well, hopefully you realize that's a difference in squares. X squared and 9 are perfect squares, and it's a difference you're subtracting. So that's going to be x plus 3 times x minus 3. So x plus 3, don't mind that bell, x minus 3. Now again, this is where I would go ahead and I would find my excluded values. You don't have to do it now, you could wait till the end, but you want to do it before you cancel things. So if you do wait till the end, you cancel some things out. We get 5x plus 2 over x plus 3, as these both cancel. But make sure you're not finding the excluded value of just this one. You can, that'll be half of it, but you still need this one that we canceled out. Because even if you plug in positive 3, it still's not going to work. You plug positive 3 into this, you still get 0 in the denominator, and you can't have that. So I always do that before I cancel anything. This one should be an easy one. This part gives you negative 3. This part gives you positive 3. So my restrictions or my excluded values are x cannot equal positive or negative 3. If you want to put the plus or minus, you can. If you want to write it out twice like this, you can. It doesn't make much difference. So that was simplifying rational expressions. Now we're going to get into multiplying rational expressions and then dividing rational expressions. If you're good at factoring and if you're good at that simplifying that we just did, the rest of this is going to be pretty much the same. It all comes down to factoring and canceling things, factoring and reducing things. So this first one is a little bit of a blast from the past because you guys should have done this back in elementary school. When we multiply fractions, you just multiply straight across. So 4 times 5 is 20. 3 times 7 is 21. That's your answer. See if you can reduce, but that ends up being your answer. Hopefully you guys remember that. For this one, I have 6 over 2 times 9 over 5. Now you could do the same thing with this. 6 times 9 is 54. 2 times 5 is 10. Then you can reduce that. So one of the things we're going to start doing, remember that you can cross reduce. Or if you just have a fraction that you can reduce, you can go ahead and do that. So 6 over 2 is just 3. 3 over 1. Take that times 9 over 5. You get the same thing. 3 times 9 is 27. 1 times 5 is 5. And that's the same thing you would have gotten if you would have reduced. So if you would have had 54 over 10, if you divided them both by 2, you get that 27 over 5. So that's one of the things we're going to be working on, reducing stuff before we multiply, because that'll definitely help you out. Now, not only can you reduce if they're in the same fraction, but this 2 and this 4, remember we talked about cross-reducing? You can reduce that out. So 2 over 4, if I divided them both by 2, this would cancel to 1. This would cancel to a 2. So 1 times 3 now is 3. 5 times 2 is 10. Again, that's the same thing you would have gotten if you took 2 times 3 is 6. 5 times 4 is 20, and divided both of them by 2. Now, number 8. I know that this seems like, yes, you did this in elementary school, we all know how to do this, but I really want to work on these reducing things. So some people look at number 8 and say, oh, 18 over 3, I can reduce that. Divide both by 3, I get 6 over 1. Some people say, well, when I look at this, I can reduce 2 and 18, that's 1 and 9, if I divide them both by 2. But the thing is, it doesn't matter which way you do it, and actually this one you have to do it both. 18 divided by 3 is 6, so if I divide both of them by 3, 3 divided by 3 is 1, 18 divided by 3 is 6. But then also now, I can take this 2 and say, well, now I have 6 and 2. If I divide both of those by 2, I get 1 and 3. So 3 times 5 is 15. 1 times 1 is 1, so that's just 15. But we'll have problems that are exactly that same way. That's what I want to make sure you remember. That's why I went over this part that you guys should have done in elementary school. So, number 9 for this one. When you do these, first thing you want to look for is factoring. We can't factor any of these, so we just have to multiply straight across. And this is really nice. If you actually do multiply these and put x squared minus 2x over 4x plus 12 and actually multiply these out, you can do that. That's the right answer. That's phenomenal. But I'm actually going to accept if you don't multiply them and you just write them out this way. X times x minus 2 over 4 times x plus 3. If you do that, that's fine. I'll accept that for this stuff. Now, I will say there still are excluded values for this. So before you cancel, before you simplify, you still need to make sure you put that x is not equal to -3. Don't forget about that. I almost did on this one. That's one of those things that's not that hard, but it's a pretty easy thing to forget. So again, first thing you want to do when you look at these is see if you can see if you can factor. Once you factor, then if they have the same thing on the top and the bottom, you can cancel. So this numerator, I can factor out a 4. So if I take out a 4, I have 2y minus 1. This one, if I factor out a 5, I have 2y minus 1. Multiplied by, then this one, if I factor out a 5, I have y minus 3. And this bottom denominator, if I take out a 3, I'll have y minus 3. So that's the first step, factoring. Factor everything you can. Second step then, you're going to cancel things. And I'm putting parentheses, same thing, top and bottom. I didn't have enough room for bottom, so B-O-T-T, close enough. You cancel things. If you have the same thing on the top and the bottom, you can cancel it. That doesn't matter if it's on the top and the bottom like this one, 2y minus 1, 2 minus y 1, or if you have them diagonally, doesn't matter. If it's on top and it's on bottom, you can cancel. So those cancel. These two cancel, since they're the exact same thing. So nothing else looks like it cancels. Oh, the 5 cancels. Don't forget about this. This happens all the time. This 5 and this 5, we have the same thing on top and bottom. Or again, you can reduce that just like a normal fraction, 5 over 5. So those will cancel. The 4 and the 3 we can't do anything else with. So for this one, now that you multiply straight across, you end up getting 4 over 3. Now the good news is, if you forgot to cancel this 5, if you didn't even think about it, you'd have 4 times 5 is 20. 5 times 3 is 15, and that would reduce down to that 4 over 3. So you can do it that way as well. Now the last thing, that is our answer, but don't forget your excluded values. Don't forget your restrictions. What would make this part 0? Well, 2y minus 1 is equal to 0. If you add 1 to both sides, divide by 2, my y value cannot be equal to 1/2. And over here, my y value cannot be equal to 3, because that would make that 0. So it cannot be equal to positive 3. Don't forget those. You won't have to do that for every single one of them, but I'm going to do that to try to get it drilled into your head. So I guess this last step 3, multiply straight across. Moving on, number 11 then. Same thing. We need to reduce everything we can, or we need to factor everything. That's the first step. So my numerator here, I want to factor that out. So 1 times 6 is 6. Factors of 6 that multiply to be 5, or sorry, that add up to be 5, 2 and 3. We can take the shortcut because there's not one in front. So this one, right down over here. Yeah, I think rewriting this fraction will definitely help. X plus 2 times x plus 3. Then you're going to factor out this one. So 1 times -12 is -12. And actually, it might help to label these out. This is a numerator, this is a denominator. That way I can find out where your factoring stuff is. So we have, let's see, 2 numbers that multiply to be -12 that add up to be 1, -1. 3 and 4, the 4 has to be negative though. So we can do the shortcut again. X plus 3 times x minus 4. Then we have 6 can't be factored at all and 8 can't be factored. So that's the first step. Second step, if you have the same thing on top and bottom, you can cancel. So 3, x plus 3, x plus 2 and x minus 4 you can't, but this 6 and the 8, we can reduce that just like a normal number, or just like a normal fraction. So both of those can be divided by 2, so that means I have 3 and 4. So now I've got x plus 2 times 3, and x minus 4 times 4. That is your answer, but don't forget we need to do the excluded values. So go back to the before you cancel stuff, what would make this 0? Negative 3. What makes this one 0? Positive 4. So x cannot be equal to negative 3 and positive 4. If that was, you'd be dividing by 0, and you get undefined. And this last one before I have you guys do some on your own. There's a lot of factoring, or more factoring, I guess. So let's do this one first. So I'm going to label my numerator. You might want to numerator 1 maybe, I don't know. Just make sure you're staying organized. I'll just put numerator. That should help. So I have 1 times negative 2 goes on top, negative 1 goes on bottom. So that's got to be 1 and 2, and the 2 is negative. So that's x plus 1 times x minus 2 on top. Then we have this denominator. So my denominator then, we have factors of 6 that add up to be negative 5. Again, that's got to be 2 and 3. But remember, this one's tricky. A lot of people get confused and they put the negative with the 3. They're both negative. Negative 2 times negative 3 is positive 6. Negative 2 plus negative 3 is negative 5. So that's x minus 2 times x minus 3. Then this one's easy. We really don't have to factor that one. I would just split it up. X minus 4 squared is x minus 4 times x minus 4. And factor this last one. So we have 1 times 4 is 4. Factors of 4 that add up to be 5 have to be 1 and 4. So I have x plus 1 and x plus 4. Now go through. Second step, if there's anything on top and bottom, you can cancel. Well, if you look, I have this x minus 2, top and bottom. But also this x plus 1 and this x plus 1. One's on top and one's on bottom. Even if they're in different fractions, that's okay. It's just like we did earlier with cross reducing. Now this x plus 4 doesn't cancel either of these x minus 4s. So when I put this all together, you can do it 2 ways. You could put x minus 4 squared, since there's 2 of them. If you want to just write it out the same way we have it out here, that's fine. Over, we have x minus 3 and x plus 4. You can leave it like that. I'm not going to make you multiply that out. You're welcome. That is your answer, but don't forget we need the excluded values, and there's a bunch of them for this one. What makes this 0? Positive 2. What makes this 0? Positive 3. This 0? Negative 1. This 0? Negative 4. So my x cannot be equal to any of those, because any of them that makes it 0, you don't want, you can't have. Make sure you don't forget to point that out. All right, I want you to do these 2 on your own, number 13 and 14. So make sure you pause the video, do this one on your own, and then hit play, and I'm going to finish this one. But make sure you pause. I'm not just going to sit here and twiddle my thumbs for about 10 minutes as you do this one. So pause it, work on your own. If you get stuck and don't know what to do, hit play and see the first couple steps. And then once you remember, hit pause, and then do some more problems until you get stuck again, and then hit play and then watch the rest of it. But that's another, like I said, a really good thing about these videos is you can do it on your own. If you get stuck, hit play, watch some of it, pause it after half of it, and then try it on your own again. Or do it all on your own and then check your work by hitting play. All right, so this is how you do this one. You factor out everything you can. This is a difference in squares. So that's going to end up being, this is x times x, and the 4 is 2 times 2. So that's x plus 2 times x minus 2. This one is also, it doesn't look like it, but it's also a difference in squares, because that 1 is 1 times 1. So x times x, 1 is 1 times 1. So we have x plus 1, x minus 1. Good news is this one doesn't cancel at all, or doesn't factor, sorry. So we have x plus 1 over, and the last one, this one you can factor, but you don't have to do, it's not any complicated thing, we just take out an x. We don't have difference in squares, like we did in the other two. We can't use the x factoring for this one, so you just need to take out a greatest common factor of x, since they both have an x. So I had 2 x's, I took 1 out, so I have 1 left. And the 2 had an x, but I took it out, so it doesn't have any left. This is where, like I said, it might not be a bad idea to come here and cancel out, or to find all your excluded values. Wouldn't be a bad idea at this point before you cancel, but we haven't been doing it that way, so that's okay. So if you see the same thing on top and bottom, we can cancel. So I have an x plus 1 and x plus 1 that cancel. I have an x plus 2 and an x plus 2 that cancel, because one's on top, one's on bottom. That's really all you can cancel. So on the numerator, we have x minus 2. In the denominator, we have x minus 1 times x. That's just x times x minus 1. Again, if you actually multiplied that out and got x squared minus x, that's fine. I'm okay with that. But make it easier on yourself. You don't have to multiply that. But then, what are our excluded values? Well, again, we're going to have to go back and check. What makes this one 0? Negative 1. This one would be positive 1. This one is negative 2, but then what about this x here? Don't forget about that. A lot of people do. If that was 0, it would make this whole thing 0. So if you plug 0 in for your x, you'd get 0 for this denominator, and it wouldn't work out. You can't divide by 0. You can't have that. So my x cannot be equal to negative 1, positive 1, 0, and negative 2. And it doesn't matter what order you write those in, as long as they're in that excluded value place. So this next one, number 14, again, do this one on your own. Once you're done with this one, hit play, and then watch me do this one. So go ahead and hit pause, and then I guess I didn't realize number 15, I have that one down. Do this one on your own as well. So I guess there's 3 of them to do on your own. Made that mistake. All right, number 14, we need to factor everything possible. So we have, this one is a difference in squares. X times x is x squared. 5 times 5 is 25. And it's a difference, it's subtraction. So we have x plus 5 times x minus 5. Then this x plus 4, the good news is we can't factor anything out of that. That's just x plus 4. Multiplied by this one, we need a factor, so we use the x factoring. Factors of negative 8 that add up to be 2 are 2 and 4. And for this one, the 2 has to be negative. That way they still add up to be positive 2. And we can take the shortcut. There's no number in front. There's no leading coefficient. So I have x minus 2 times x plus 4. And the last one, this one, x squared. I need factors of 25 that add up to be 10. Hopefully you guys realize that's 5 pretty quickly. X plus 5 times x plus 5. So we did factoring, now we need to cancel. Again, if you want to find your excluded values here, you can. But we have an x plus 5 and an x plus 5. Now, there's only one, we only cancel one of them. There's only one on top, so you can only cancel one on bottom. This 1x plus 5 doesn't cancel both of these. You can't do that. If there was 2 of them on top, then you definitely could. But 1 on top only cancels 1 on bottom. X plus 4 cancels x plus 4. So all we have left is x minus 5 times x minus 2. If you want to multiply that out, be my guest. And in the bottom, we just have x plus 5. Don't forget your excluded values. X cannot be equal to negative 4 for this one, negative 5 for this one, and negative 5 for this one, which means you really only have to write it down once. If you write it down twice, that's fine. But we already said x couldn't be negative 5, so you're not going to do it twice. And this last one to do on your own, number 15. Again, please pause this And then once you are done or once you get stuck, hit play and watch it. If you get stuck, hit play and watch it until you figure out what you're doing, then pause it again. So again, a lot of factoring with this. Factor this one. We need two numbers that multiply to be 6, that add up to be -5. That's 2 times 3. Both of them are negative, because they both multiply to be +6. Negative times negative is positive. They both add up to be -5. We can take our shortcut. That's the good news with these. And this is what I'm talking about, where you guys need to be really good at factoring by now. If not, you need to keep doing homework and keep doing these notes on your own. We've done this a bunch of times. X minus 4 is difference in squares. X times x and 2 times 2. So that x plus 2 times x minus 2. This one we have 1 times 2 goes on top. That's 2. Factors of 2 that add up to be 3 are 1 and 2. Again, I'm hoping you guys are getting pretty good at this factoring stuff, getting pretty tired of it. And your last one, we have -3 that adds up to -2. It's got to be 1 and 3, and the 3 is negative. X plus 1 times x minus 3. Now remember, we were able to do all those without doing it the long way by taking the shortcut, because none of them had leading coefficients, so don't forget about that. So if the same thing's on top and bottom, you can cancel. So x minus 2 and x minus 2 cancel. X minus 3 and x minus 3 cancel. X plus 2 and x plus 2 cancel. And there we go, x plus 1 and x plus 1 cancels. So what do we have left on top? Nothing. So it's a 1. What do we have left in bottom? Nothing. So it's over 1. Well, 1 over 1 is 1. So that one, oddly enough, all reduces down just to 1. Don't forget your excluded values. We have -2 for this one, +2 for this one, -1 for this one, +3 for this one. So -2, sorry, x cannot equal -2, +2, -1, and +3. All right, almost done. Now we're getting into dividing rational expressions. But again, dividing really is just multiplying. It's no different. The only thing that's different is you have to multiply by your reciprocal. So don't cancel anything yet. Don't do that. You have to wait until we multiply by reciprocal. So the first one doesn't change up. The reciprocal is the second one. So we multiply by 4 over 3. The reciprocal just means we flip that. Now if you can cancel, you can, or if you can cross reduce. This one we can't. 2 times 4 is 8. 3 times 3 is 9. We just end up with 8 over 9. Same thing with this one. 6 over 4. Now that one, since that's all in one fraction, technically you could reduce now, but I wouldn't do that. I would play it safe. I would always just wait until you multiply by the reciprocal. That way you don't have to worry about it. Let's do, we could divide both by 3, so that would cancel the 1, that would cancel the 2. I could cancel by 2 now, so 2 divided by 2 is 1, 2 divided by 4 is 2. So 1 times 5 is 5, 2 times 1 is 1, or sorry, 2. That ends up giving us 5 over 2. But really, again, the only difference is you're multiplying by reciprocal. So after that first step, it's all the same. So, number 18, we have division. So the first thing I'm going to do, sorry, I should change that. We have division. First thing I'm going to do before I factor, before I do anything, is multiply by reciprocal. If you try to factor and try to multiply by reciprocal in one step, it does not work out very well for most people. Now, some of you guys are going to not listen to me and do it, and some of you guys maybe are going to be fine. But I've seen a ton of people miss points, and they know how to do it, they just try to do too much in one step. So my first thing I do, I just rewrite this. X squared minus x minus 12 over x plus 3 multiplied by the reciprocal, x plus 5 over x squared minus 6x plus 8. Now remember, the reciprocal is always the second fraction, never the first. The first stays the same. Now it's the exact same thing we've been doing. We need to factor this first one, so negative 12 that adds up to be negative 1 is 3 and negative 4. I know I'm going a little bit quickly through this, but it's because we just did this a bunch of times. If I'm going too fast, pause it, rewind it, watch it again. The other part, this one, sorry, color coordinating. This one doesn't change. We can't factor anything out of that one. This one, nothing changes. Can't factor anything out of that one. And the last one, this one definitely can factor, or we should see, maybe it doesn't. Factors of 8 that add up to be -6, 2 and 4, but again, it's -2 and -4. Be careful with that. X minus 2 times x minus 4. Then, from here, we can cancel x plus 3, x plus 3, x minus 4, x minus 4. All we have left then is x plus 5 over x minus 2. Now, one thing I want to say with this. Thought I wrote it down on one of these slides. Maybe I didn't. There are excluded values in this. But I'm going to ignore them because it gets really complicated. And this is why. What would make this 0? -3. That would be one of your excluded values. What makes this one 0? Because it's in the denominator, -5. So that'd be another excluded value. Because it can't have a 0 in the denominator. But also, you can't divide by 0, which means if this numerator is 0, 0 divided by anything is 0, so we'd be dividing by 0, so you'd have to check this one to see what that excluded values would be. Down here, the denominator over here, so that'd be +2 and +4. That gets too confusing. I'm not going to worry about that for this one. So for division problems, don't worry about it. Now, if you're wondering when to find excluded values and when not to, I will specifically tell you in the instructions. In the instructions, it'll say find all excluded values or find all the restrictions on the variables. I will never just have you do it on your own. You can hold me to that. If I count you wrong and it didn't say so in the instructions, let me know. I'll fix it. Number 19, again, we have a division problem. So before I do anything, I just go ahead and I write this out as multiply by reciprocal. The first one does not change at all. Then the second one is the reciprocal over 4x squared. So for this one, I can factor out a 2x. Don't ever forget about just a greatest common factor. I got a lot of people that say they can't factor that because it's not x box factoring and it's not a difference in squares. We can always just take out a 2x. So that is x. 2 divided by 2 is 1. I had 2 x's then. I took 1 out. 12 divided by 2 is 6. I had 1x. I took it out. So I just have x plus 6. This one is a difference in squares. X plus 6 times x minus 6. This one, we're going to have to use the factoring. So factors of -12 that add up to be -4 have to be 2 and 6. And the 6 is negative. So x plus 2 times x minus 6. And the last one, 4x squared, can't do anything with that. Now there's some things in here that a lot of people mess up on, so I'm going to have to make sure you pay attention. Cancel everything like normal. X plus 6 cancel. X minus 6 cancel. But here's what people get confused with. This 2x and this 4x squared, you can factor that or you can reduce that out. Sorry, not factor. Now, if you forget, it's okay because you end up with 2x times x plus 2 over 4x squared. So hopefully now you realize you can cancel those. So if you want to do that, that's fine. Just make sure you don't forget at the end. But you can also do it in this step. I can take 2 divided by 2 is 1. 4 divided by 2 is 2. I have an x on top and 2 of them on bottom. So if I take 1 x out of the top and the bottom, I have 1 left. So on top, we just have the x plus 2. On bottom, all we have is 2x. Don't have to worry about the excluded values for that one. Now again, on your own, go ahead, pause the video now. Try to do this on your own. When you get done or when you get stuck, push play again. So, oh, sorry, don't factor the first one yet. We're dividing, so the first thing we have to do is multiply by reciprocal. Multiply by reciprocal. Minus x minus 1 over 2x. 2x plus 5. Then we have the reciprocal, x minus 1 squared over 2x squared plus 3x plus 1. Now, I will tell you with this one, it's a little bit more difficult because we have these leading coefficients here. So I'm going to give myself a little bit more room with that one. 2 times -1 goes in the numerator, or sorry, goes on top. Factors of -2 that add up to be -1 are 1 and 2. It's a negative. But we can't do the shortcut. We have to do it the long way. 2x plus 1x minus 2x minus 1. Put those together. I can take out an x. That leaves 2x plus 1. Over here, you can't take anything out, but they're both negative, so you want to take out a negative. If this first one is ever a negative, you have to take out at least a -1. So you end up with, good place to put this, guess we'll just do right here. 2x plus 1 goes together, and x minus 1 is left. Sorry, I want to put that in green. So then, the denominator, 2x plus 5 doesn't change at all, so that's nice. 2x plus 5. My numerator is a square, so we have x minus 1 times x minus 1. And last, we have to factor out this one. It's the same thing. 2 times 1 is 2. Factors of 2 that add up to be 3 are 1 and 2. They're both positive this time. 2x squared plus 1x plus 2x, or sorry, yeah, plus 2x plus 1. And we do that same factor by grouping. Take out an x, that's 2x plus 1. Can't take anything out of the second one. If you ever can't take anything out, you have to take out a 1. If you're ever doing factor by grouping, you can't take something out, it's got to be a 1. So this one ends up being 2x plus 1 times x plus 1. Now the hard part's over. Now we can reduce things. If you have the same thing on top and the bottom. And with this one, we have a 2x plus 1 on top, 2x plus 1 on bottom. We have an x minus 1 here, and an x minus 1 here, but they're both on top, so we can't cancel those. We have an x plus 1 and an x minus 1, x plus 1, x minus 1, but those aren't the same. So you end up with, in the numerator, x minus 1 to the third, since there's 3 of them. You don't have to do that. You could write it out, x minus 1, x minus 1, x minus 1, over 2x plus 5 times x plus 1. And the last one, again, do this on your own. If you need help or you get done, then you can hit play and watch the rest of this. 6 over 6b minus 6. Make sure you can tell the difference between your b's and your 6's. And actually, with this one, if you want to make all these into x's, if that helps you, go ahead and do that. That's totally fine. I'm not going to count you wrong because you did all the right work. You just have x's in there. So that's multiplied by 6b plus 24 over b squared plus 12b plus 32. So this one obviously can't be factored. It's just 6. This one I can take out a 6, so I'm left with b minus 1. This one I can take out a 6, so that's b plus 4. And this one I'm going to have to factor, but the good news is we can do the shortcut this time. So factors of 32 that add up to be 12, 8 and 4. So you end up with, now be careful, if you put x plus 8 and x plus 4, you have to be careful because we're using b's now. It's another reason you might want to switch. B plus 8, b plus 4. And now wherever you can cancel. So we have 6 divided by 6 is 1, that cancels, that's fine. B plus 4 and b plus 4. You end up getting, in the numerator, all we have left is 6. In the denominator, we have b minus 1 times b plus 8. It's division, so you don't have to worry about the excluded values. Again, you don't have to worry, just follow the instructions. I'll tell you when I need excluded values. So, overall, this lesson, it's a lot of factoring. Other than that, this is really not that hard. We're going to get to other ones that it's a lot of work, but again, step by step, it's not too bad, and it's a lot of factoring. That's going to be the name of the game for this, these couple sections in Chapter 8, where there's a lot of factoring. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to email me.